We have a special guest coming in today, but he's coming in through video. And his name is Chip Conley. Now, he wasn't able to fly in because his schedule is so busy, but we're going to be bringing in Chip Conley, and he's right there up on the screen. Let me introduce Chip real quick before he starts chatting with us. Chip Conley, he's the rebel hospitality entrepreneur and New York Times best-selling author. At age 26, he founded Joy de Vivre Hospitality, transforming an inner-city motel into the second largest boutique motel brand in America. He sold this business after running it as a CEO for 24 years, and soon the young founders of Airbnb asked him to help transform their promising startup into the world's leading hospitality brand. Today, he acts as the company's strategic advisor for hospitality and leadership. Chip Conley, hello, Chip.
All right. Well, I appreciated Brooke's discussion about acclamation because my 10 minutes with you will be about acclamation as well. I'm going to give you a little story that really describes my last 5.5 years about intergenerational collaboration. So it was the third day on my job at a hot Silicon Valley startup in early 2013. I was about double the age of the dozen engineers in the room. I'd been brought in to this company because of my experience in my field, but in that particular room, I felt like a newbie amongst the tech geniuses. So I did my best to be invisible. And then the 25-year-old wizard who was running the meeting turned to me and asked, Chip, if you shipped a feature and no one used it, did it really ship? Ship a feature. I had no idea what he was talking about. I was trying to be invisible. I don't understand tech lingo. So after an awkward minute, he moved on, and I mercifully was able to just slink down in my seat and hope that meeting got over very quickly. That was my first introduction to Airbnb 5.5 years ago. I'd been invited by the 3 millennial co-founders of Airbnb to help take their small high-tech startup and turn it into a global hospitality brand. I was also invited to be the in-house mentor for CEO Brian Chesky, one of the co-founders. Now, I'd spent from age 26 to 52 as a boutique hotel entrepreneur, so I accumulated quite a bit of hotel knowledge. But after my first week of acclamation in Airbnb, I realized that the brave new home sharing world didn't need most of my old school bricks and mortar hotel insights. A stark reality rocked me. What do I have to offer these young people? I'm twice the age of the average employee in the company. I've never worked in a tech company at age 52. I'm almost 58 now. And I'm reporting to a guy 21 years younger than me, Brian. 5.5 years ago, I had never even heard of the sharing economy, nor did I have an Uber or Lyft app on my phone. This was not my natural habitat. So instead of running for the hills, which is what I could have done, or just casting judgment on these young tech geniuses, instead I decided to turn my judgment into curiosity and see if I could match my wise eyes with their fresh eyes. I fancied myself a Margaret Mead, a modern Margaret Mead amongst the millennials, almost like a cultural anthropologist. And quickly I saw that I had as much to offer them as they did to me. However, the more I thought about it, the more I've seen that our respective generations often operate like isolationist countries on the same continent. We may share a border, but we don't necessarily share the necessary trust for us to share our respective wisdom. Looking at the modern workplace today, I've come to believe that one of the essential trade agreements of our time is opening up these pipelines of intergenerational wisdom across all of the generations. Almost 40% of us Americans have a boss that's younger than us, and that number is growing quickly. Power is cascading to the young like never before because of our growing reliance on DQ, digital intelligence. We see young founders like the Airbnb founders in their early to mid 20s create a global giant before their 30th birthday. And yet we somehow expect these young digital leaders to miraculously embody the relationship wisdoms we older workers have had many decades to learn. It's hard to microwave your emotional intelligence. We have ample evidence that gender and ethnically diverse company teams are more effective. But what about age? This is an important question because unintentionally we now have, as you know, 5 generations in the workplace at the same time. So maybe it's time to get a little bit more intentional about how we work together. A number of European studies have shown that age-diverse teams are more effective. And yet just 8% of companies who have a diversity and inclusion program have expanded that strategy to include age as just important of a demographic as race or gender. Maybe they didn't get the memo. The world is getting older. One paradox of our time is that baby boomers are actually healthy longer, more vibrant longer, in the workplace longer, and yet often feeling less and less relevant. Some of us feel like an old carton of milk with an expiration date stamped on our wrinkled foreheads. For many in midlife, this isn't just a feeling, it's a harsh reality, especially when they lose their job and the phone stops ringing. For many, they see that maybe they're as a liability more than an asset. We've all heard of the phrase, maybe 60 is the new 40, physically, right? Well, when it comes to power in the workplace today, especially where I'm from, in the Silicon Valley, 30 is the new 50. If power is moving at least 10 years older, if we're all going to live about 10 years older, and power is actually moving 10 years younger, do the math. Society has created a new 20-year irrelevancy gap that didn't exist before. Midlife used to be considered 45 to 65, but I would suggest it's actually become a midlife marathon from 35 to 75, as many people in certain industries and certain parts of the world are actually starting to feel irrelevant in their mid-30s, and many of us will actually work and not retire until our mid-70s, either through necessity or by choice. So that's all depressing on some level, but there's a bright spot. Why is it that we become wiser about our humanity as we get older? Our physical peak may be our 20s. Our financial peak, at least from a salary perspective, is around age 50. But our emotional peak is often in midlife and beyond because we've developed a pattern recognition about ourselves and others. So how can we help companies tap into that valuable midlife wisdom while also continuing to nurture their brilliant young digital natives? To me, that is what a great company will do today and in the future. They'll actually create that powerful alchemy across generations. Here's how the alchemy worked for me at Airbnb. I was assigned a smart young partner to help me create a hospitality and strategy team for the company, since my role was to be the head of global hospitality and strategy. Early on, Laura Hughes knew I was a little lost, and so we often sat next to each other in meetings so that as tech lingo was actually mentioned in the meeting, I could actually write her notes about what I wasn't understanding. She was almost like my tech translator. When I first met Laura 5.5 years ago, she was 27 years old. She'd spent 4 years at Google and a year and a half at Airbnb. Like many of her millennial cohorts, she had grown in her leadership and become a manager without any kind of formal leadership training. I don't care if you're in the B2B world, B2C, C2C, or A to Z, business and organizations are basically H to H, human to human. And yet Laura's approach to leadership had been forged in the technocratic world and was all about accountability charts and business roadmaps, and it was purely metric driven. One of the things she said to me early on when we were working together is, I love the fact that you bring a team together and we as a team create a vision that becomes a North Star for us. And Chip, while your fact knowledge about like how many rooms a maid cleans in an 8-hour shift may not be all that valuable here at Airbnb and in the home sharing world. Your process knowledge about how do you get things done, knowing the underlying motivations of everybody at the table, and understanding the organizational savvy to get things done in an organization, all of that was very valuable when, frankly, most of us have never been in an organization before. During my time at Airbnb, I started to see that a new kind of elder was emerging in the workplace, but not the elder of the past who was regarded with reverence. No, what's striking about the modern elder is their relevance, the fact that they can take their timeless wisdom and apply it to modern day problems. Maybe it's time we value wisdom as much as we do disruption, and I absolutely think it's time that we actually reclaimed the word elder, but gave it a modern twist. The modern elder is as much an intern as they are a mentor, because they realize that their beginner's mind and their catalytic curiosity is a life-affirming elixir for both themselves and everyone else around them. Intergen improv is well known in the music world. Think Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga, or Wynton Marsalis and the young stars of jazz. In the business world, this kind of riffing off each other's skills may take the form of mutual mentorship. For example, for me, it was millennial DQ, digital intelligence, for boomer or Gen X EQ, emotional intelligence. At Airbnb, I experienced the benefits of this kind of intergenerational reciprocity when Laura and I took on the responsibility, along with our stellar data science team, of remaking Airbnb's peer-to-peer review system using Laura's analytical mind and my human-centered intuition. With this powerful and perfect alchemy of algorithm and people wisdom, we were able to take this instantaneous feedback loop and make it dramatically better so our hosts around the world understood better what our guests were looking for, and our guest satisfaction scores went off the charts. It was a great example of high tech meets high touch. As a modern elder, I also learned to intern publicly and mentor privately. Search engines are amazing at giving you an answer, but a wise guide will offer you just the right question. Google doesn't understand nuance like a perfectly attuned or a finely attuned human heart and mind. Over time, to my surprise, dozens of Airbnb employees from all over the country, all over the world, frankly, started approaching me to be a mentor. And I said yes every single time because, frankly, they were mentoring me as much as I was mentoring them. In sum, Brian Chesky, the CEO, brought me into Airbnb for my industry knowledge, but what I really brought was my well-earned wisdom. Maybe it's time we retire that old term knowledge worker, which is from 1959 from Peter Drucker, and replace it with wisdom worker, because actually that's what we probably need more and more in the workplace. With 5 generations in today's workplace, we can either operate as separate isolationist countries, or we can find a way to actually build bridges across those generational divides so that we can actually learn from each other and delight in learning from people both older and younger than us. And it's time we actually change the physics of how we think about wisdom. So it doesn't just move from old to young, but it also moves from young to old as well. So what about in your life? Personally, who could you create a mutual mentorship relationship with? And organizationally, how can you create and foster the flow of wisdom across generations? To me, this is the new sharing economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chip Connolly.
Now I'm glad I
Chip, do you have time for one question?
Sure.
Okay. Who has a question for Chip? I have a question for Chip. Chip, what was the biggest obstacle that you had with Brian and the other millennials? What was the one obstacle that surprised you the most, and how did you overcome it?
My ego. The obstacle was not external, it was internal. So I want to speak to that for a moment. And let me just say two other thoughts. One is for those who wanted to understand this 5.5-year relationship I've had with this millennial Brian Chesky, who's now a billionaire. We were on the Commonwealth Club stage in San Francisco last week. And if you just do Brian Chesky, Chip Conley, Commonwealth Club, you can watch a video of the two of us on stage. And it's a really interesting exercise in how two people can get along, who are 21 years younger than each other, 21 years, different age difference. Additionally, I have a book that just came out called Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder, that actually speaks to all of this. My biggest challenge really was my own personal challenge. It was the challenge of, can I evolve? It's interesting. We often think that the enemy is outside of us, or when it comes across to generations, that generational dialects are so different that somehow we aren't going to be able to get along. But frankly, what I've seen from many of my cohorts who are boomers, especially in Silicon Valley, is frankly a bit of a lack of respect for people who are younger than them, and a lack of evolution in their own willingness to evolve their sense of their identity and their knowledge. So to be more specific, I was a longtime hotelier. I was a CEO for 24 years. I joined a company where I was no longer the CEO. I was reporting to someone who is the CEO who's 21 years younger than me. I was also mentoring him. And the knowledge that I had from the hotel industry was not necessarily all that valuable. So I had to absolutely be willing to say, I'm no longer the CEO here. I had to right-size my ego around that. I need to make sure that my job was not to actually make Brian look bad as the CEO. And so that's why I was privately mentoring him. I needed to make sure that technology. And so I would say that the biggest impediment that many of us often have is not only our judgments of others, but it's our own unwillingness to evolve how we see ourselves and how we see the process of learning over a lifetime.
Thank you so much, Chip. That was absolutely valuable and priceless information. We really appreciate you Skyping in. One more round of applause for Chip Connolly, please.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Everybody say bye, Chip.
Bye-bye. Sorry I'm not there.
Well, hopefully we can be here next year. We'd love to meet you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chip. You have a beautiful day. Bye.